I, 34F, have been looking after my foster daughter Mary, 13F, for over a year, ever since her parents overdosed on drugs. I also have a biological daughter, Lila, 12F. Mary and Lila mostly get along, although there have been some minor arguments. A few weeks ago, the police came to Lila's school. Someone had sent an anonymous message to the school saying that Lila was in possession of drugs. After searching through her phone, locker, and bags, they realized that the drugs in question were Skittles that Lila had lying around in her bag, accidentally ripping open the packaging. Lila was terrified of the police and was traumatized by the incident. She's a very shy, quiet girl who had a panic attack at the thought of being sent to prison. While they wouldn't reveal who told on her, Lila suspected that it was Mary since she was the only one who could have seen the Skittles in her bag. Mary denied this at first, but eventually she snapped under pressure and admitted it. She said she made a mistake and was scared that Lila would overdose like her parents. I know that Mary has trauma related to drugs, but that's not an excuse. I've made it very clear that she can come talk to me about anything, even if it involves Lila, and yet she went to the school instead of telling me first. Mary said that she only went to the school in case I was biased towards Lila. She knew full well the legal ramifications of her actions. Both of them could have potentially been removed from my care. I can't help but think her intentions are malicious. Skittles look absolutely nothing like drugs. She didn't even talk to me or Lila about it. She just went straight to the authorities. So I decided to ground her, stop her allowance, increase her chores, and take away her electronics for the entire summer. She's still upset with me for this, saying I went too far and I was punishing her for having trauma and trying to do the right thing. But I feel like I have a duty to teach her that it's not okay to potentially get our entire family into legal trouble over a misunderstanding. Ida? Edit. The reason I thought she had malicious intentions was because the week before, Mary, coincidentally, started a large argument with Lila for hanging out with Mary's crush. Lila eats candy all the time, especially Skittles, and Mary knows that Skittles are her favorite. Some of OP's comments. Commenter, just FYI drugs, one example fentanyl, come in many variations that look exactly like candy. Just throwing that out there. OP, downvoted. I know that there are some drugs that resemble candy, but I've never heard of drugs that look like Skittles. Even those candy fentanyl drugs are pastel-colored, not brightly colored like Skittles. Commenter, what would motivate her to be malicious? You stated that they get along fine and only argue occasionally, which is very normal for kids. OP, the week before the whole drugs incident, they got into an argument because Lila was hanging out with Mary's crush, although Mary swears this was just a coincidence. Lila eats candy all the time, and Skittles are her favorite, and Mary knows this full well. Top comment, Willikers. I'm tempted to say YTA, bordering on NH. I think that Mary's reasoning is fairly sound. She's a kid who's deeply traumatized by experiences in her own life with people using drugs. And it's very, very hard for a 13-year-old to conceptualize the repercussions for something like this. If she was acting out of malice, that's one thing. But I think it's pretty hard for anyone online to be able to say if that's the case. That said, I do think your punishment is extreme. I think this is a great opportunity to have more heart-to-hearts with Mary and help her learn how serious this could have been. Is she already in therapy? I assume she must be as a foster child with her history, but if not, she absolutely should be. Additionally, if Mary was exacting out of jealousy or some other feelings around your bio daughter, layering on punishments may just make that separation worse. Do they generally get along well? Are they close or more distant? Mary is going through an immense amount of loss and change, and her feelings toward your daughter are likely very complicated even if they're generally close and friends. I think it would be reasonable to lighten up your punishments while also checking in with her more regularly and emphasizing the seriousness of the situation. Depending on the quality of your caseworkers, you may want to discuss with them as well. Update Post 1. After receiving thousands upon thousands of comments, I would like to say that I realized my mistake. I wasn't taking into account the immense amount of trauma that Mary has gone through at such a young age and the effect it had on her actions. I had a tough, but necessary conversation with both Lila and Mary. We had a heart-to-heart, so that both girls could hear from each other's perspectives. What had happened was, Mary found out that Lila had been hanging out with a boy that Lila knew was Mary's crush. This was also the 1-year anniversary of Mary's parents' overdose, and she confessed that her grief coupled with what she interpreted as Lila's betrayal influenced what happened the following week. Mary maintains that she'd mistaken the candy for drugs, but she owned up to the fact that she'd notified the teachers, not only because she was concerned for Lila's safety, but because she believed that it wasn't fair for Lila to get away unpunished for having drugs after everything that had happened to Mary's parents. I know I should have been angry at Mary, But seeing the response to my initial post has opened my eyes. I've been informed that traumatized children can lose their common sense after being exposed to triggers. I assume this applies even more when it occurs around the anniversary of their trauma, and this can lead them to make decisions that may sound outlandish in any other circumstances, decisions such as mistaking candy for drugs. Mary has had bad experiences in foster homes before. Several years before her parents' overdose, she was placed in foster care for the first time, before being reunited with her parents. She was in 3 different foster families, and in all of them, her foster parents favored their biological children, and they punished Mary if she told them about their bio children misbehaving. She was terrified that I would do the same, which is why she didn't come to me first. Mary acted out of pain, and I acted out of frustration without even hearing her side of the story. I lifted Mary's punishment. At that point, we still had nearly 3 weeks of summer break left. Lila has forgiven Mary, and we decided to put this incident behind us. Being a foster parent can be challenging, but I will be doing everything I can to learn from this situation and be a better mother moving forward. Note: comments were heavily mixed on this post as well. Top comment. Commenter: IDK. I think she might be lying a bit about her parents being the motivation here, and not the boy. Also, are you sure your daughter has forgiven her, and not just lost confidence in your ability/desire to protect her from Mary? What are you doing to protect your daughter if Mary tries something like this again? Second most upvoted comment. Commenter: be sure your daughter truly does feel safe with a person who lied and tried to get her in so much trouble out of jealousy. You weren't punishing Mary for something she didn't do. It was a terrible, terrible thing she did that even now could have lifelong consequences for your relationship with your daughter. By that I mean your daughter never trusting you to have her back ever again, or feeling like she has to forgive this terrible betrayal that Mary did. I'm sorry, but in your daughter's place, I would just quietly stop trusting the both of you. I would be nice and even laugh and have fun with you both occasionally, but I would just quietly not forgive you. I would not feel like I could be safe with you, even though you were my mother, even after Mary left. Update 2. Well, I guess I thought everything had settled down after our heart-to-heart, but oh boy, was I wrong. Things have escalated, and I'm honestly not sure how to even handle it anymore. About 2 weeks after I lifted Mary's punishment, things seemed okay on the surface. Lila and Mary were getting along again, maybe not as tight as before, but I saw them laughing together, sharing snacks, even staying up late watching movies. I thought we were finally moving forward. I thought wrong. A few days ago, I noticed something strange. Lila had started becoming more withdrawn, even more so than before. She's naturally shy, but this felt different. When I'd ask her how her day was, she'd give me one-word answers and avoid eye contact. She'd spend more time alone in her room, and I heard her crying more than once. I chalked it up to lingering trauma from the whole drug incident, and maybe a bit of preteen moodiness, but something about it didn't sit right with me. Then came the notebook. I was doing laundry, honestly just trying to keep my house from descending into chaos, when I found it tucked away in Lila's hoodie pocket, this tiny, spiral-bound notebook that I'd never seen her use before. Now, I'm not usually one to snoop, but considering everything that had happened, my gut was screaming at me to take a peek. And wow, I almost wish I hadn't. Lila had been keeping a record of everything Mary had done over the past year. Every snide comment, every eye roll, every single time Mary made her feel small or embarrassed. It wasn't just about the Skittles incident. There were pages of little moments, things I had brushed off as normal sibling rivalry or growing pains. But to Lila, they weren't minor. They were piling up like bricks. One entry, dated 2 weeks after the drug fiasco, hit me like a freight train. Mom said she forgave her. She always forgives her. I don't think she even cares what happened. I wonder if she'd notice if I just stopped trying. Mary wins. She always does. It was like a punch to the gut. My stomach turned, and I realized I had missed so much. All those moments when I thought they were fine, Lila was quietly hurting, convincing herself that I wasn't on her side. And I couldn't help but wonder, was she right? As if that wasn't enough, later that night, something happened that blew the lid off everything. Mary had been on edge too, more irritable than usual. She came stomping into the kitchen, practically throwing her plate in the sink after dinner. I was about to ask her what was wrong when Lila, in her soft voice, asked if she could have some of Mary's candy that she'd left on the counter. And then, Mary exploded. "Why do you always take what's mine?" she screamed, her face red and eyes wild. "First my crush, then my mom's attention, and now my stuff? Can't you leave anything for me?" Lila froze, her face going pale. I jumped in immediately, telling Mary to calm down, but she wasn't done. "You think you're so perfect, don't you? But you're just a spoiled brat who gets away with everything because you're real. You know what, Lila? I wish you'd just disappear. Then maybe Mom would actually care about me for once." The room went dead silent. Lila's eyes welled up, and before I could say anything, she bolted upstairs. I could hear her sobbing through the walls. I turned to Mary, completely floored. "What the hell was that, Mary? That was cruel." She didn't apologize. She didn't even flinch. Instead, she stormed out of the house without a word, slamming the door behind her. I wanted to run after her, but I had to check on Lila first. I found her curled up in her bed, clutching that same notebook to her chest. She wouldn't talk to me, wouldn't even look at me. "Do you think I don't care about you?" I asked, trying not to break down myself. She just shrugged, and in the tiniest voice said, "You let her stay, even after she almost ruined my life." What does that tell me? I didn't have an answer. I still don't. I tried to hug her, but she gently pushed me away and rolled over, facing the wall. Mary didn't come back that night. I got a call from her caseworker the next morning. Mary had shown up at her office, saying she didn't want to live with me anymore. She felt like I favored Lila and didn't care about her trauma. She said she was ready to be moved to another foster home. So here I am, stuck between my two daughters. One feels like I don't protect her, and the other feels like I'm punishing her for having trauma. And I honestly don't know what to do anymore. Mary's staying with her caseworker for now, while they figure out what comes next. Lila's been avoiding me like the plague, and I can't even begin to untangle the mess of emotions I'm feeling. Update 3. After Mary left to stay with her caseworker, I thought I had some time to figure things out to mend things with Lila, and maybe, just maybe, convince Mary to come back. But life doesn't work like that, apparently. 2 days after Mary left, I was called into a meeting with her caseworker. I walked in, expecting to talk about Mary's next steps, but instead I found Mary's biological aunt sitting there, an aunt I didn't even know existed. She'd been living abroad and only just found out about Mary's situation. And get this, she wanted to take custody of Mary. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. This woman, whom Mary barely even knew, was suddenly swooping in like some last-minute superhero. The caseworker explained that, legally, family members take priority in foster care situations, and since the aunt was deemed fit, there was nothing I could do to stop it. Just like that, Mary had a new home lined up. I was heartbroken, furious, even. But the reality was, Mary hadn't reached out to me since she left. She didn't want to come back. Maybe this was what she needed, a fresh start. A family she didn't feel like an outsider in. Still, it felt like a knife in the gut. Meanwhile, things with Lila were spiraling out of control. After finding out that Mary might never come back, she actually smiled. It was like some weight had been lifted off her shoulders. But then, the guilt hit me. Had I really failed Mary so badly that she preferred to live with a complete stranger over us? Lila didn't seem to care. In fact, she started acting oddly confident, like she'd won some twisted game. She started bringing up the Skittles incident again, saying, "I told you she was trouble. Maybe she wanted to get rid of me." I tried to have a serious talk with her, but the words wouldn't come out right. Lila's resentment toward Mary had simmered for longer than I'd realized, and I'd been too blinded by my own guilt to notice it. She saw Mary as a threat, someone who came into her life and disrupted everything, someone she never had to worry about again. Then, in the middle of all this chaos, I got a text from Mary. My heart stopped. After days of silence, she finally wanted to talk. The message was short but loaded with emotion. "I'm leaving with my aunt tomorrow. Thanks for everything. You were a good mom, but I just can't stay here. Take care of Lila." I sat there, staring at my phone, feeling like I'd been punched in the chest. I didn't know what to say. What could I say? I'd lost her. Maybe I'd lost both of them in different ways. That night, as I sat at the dinner table with Lila, it hit me. This was our life now, just the two of us. But something felt off. Lila seemed too at ease with Mary leaving, and that nagging feeling in my gut only grew. Then came the bombshell. The next morning, I got another message from Mary's caseworker. Mary had confessed something to her, something she hadn't told me. It turns out, she didn't just accidentally find those Skittles in Lila's bag. She'd been watching Lila closely for weeks, jealously. Yes, but also because she thought Lila was sneaking around. Mary had actually found a text on Lila's phone, a text that suggested Lila knew exactly what she was doing with those Skittles. It wasn't an innocent mistake. Lila had planted the Skittles to make it look like drugs, to provoke Mary, to set her up. The truth hit me like a freight train. My quiet, shy little Lila had orchestrated this entire mess. I confronted her, shaking with anger, and she didn't even try to deny it. She was always getting in the way, she said, cold as ice. I wanted her gone. And with that, my world crumbled. Now, Mary is gone. living with her aunt. Lila is still here, but I can't look at her the same way. My trust in her is shattered, and the house feels emptier than ever. I don't know where to go from here. Everything I thought I knew about my daughters, my family, has been flipped upside down.